Good morning, folks. My name is Rob Eiler, and I want to thank Chabin Concepts and Kaiser Marston Associates for sponsoring these webinars. It's just going to be me today. Between the fires and some medical issues, Chabin's staff was unable to join us today, so I'm going to be your host and your speaker. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and after I'm done providing my exposition, we will look at the chat and I will try to answer some questions before our time is up at 9 o'clock. But thank you for making the time this morning, given everything that's going on in California. It's just been a crazy 10-day stretch here, and I hope you're safe. And I want to put a shout out to anybody who is a first responder in any capacity and those that work on the front lines. Thank you for your service. So folks, let's get started. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to move you through some of the basic data updates and try to give you a sense of where the new forecasts are coming and some of the caveats that might be there, but also some of the good things that are happening. So right off the top, the US data came out for July early in August, and the California data came out on Friday, August 21. And you can see there's some of the basic data that US is down to about 10.3% unemployment and about still 11.65 million people out of work from last July. And California is down to 13.7% unemployment, still 2.3 million people out of work. And the forecasts are evolving in a more positive way at this stage. But it's important, as I'll show you in a minute, that while the forecasts are evolving more positively and the economy seems to be on the right track, it's going to be a slow movement from all forecasts and just from thinking about theory and history, given the depth we went down and still are sort of slowly crawling out of. So regardless of the political rhetoric you hear between now and November 3, be very cautious to put a filter on that, given the way economics works, especially how macroeconomies recover. And I'll show you a little bit how the different states in the United States are recovering, which again gives you a sense that it might be a little bit longer than, let's say, early 2021 as purported in certain camps. It is unlikely to be a true V-shaped recovery. However, good things are happening. Now, thinking about what's coming, we got to think that there's still a fiscal stimulus round that's being debated in Congress as we speak, or at least when they get back to work. The election may have some effect. Equities have come back, but that's a lot of a function of investor confidence and sort of betting on future events. And in both those cases, are they really going to help jobs? And jobs at the end of the day, folks, is how we're going to ultimately recover from this in a more complete fashion vis-a-vis where we were in early January. And we're still watching housing. And for right now, as you'll see in a minute in the data, the housing markets actually have remained relatively stable. And part of that's because we had relatively low vacancies. So supply and demand are relatively well balanced right now. And with low interest rates, that's also helping. So in general, the next round of data has been relatively good, and we're waiting to see how the next couple of months go. But as we'll see in a minute, the forecasts are evolving a little bit better. Now, just as a reminder, recovery works in a very simple way. Once businesses become stable again, either because of accommodative policy, when monetary and fiscal policy both come to bear on businesses and their ability to get back to producing goods and services because demand is coming back from the households, they start hiring workers back. So if the initial move is to let people go, business stability then allows people to come back, and that provides stability to labor markets and housing markets regionally. So where you are, you might be seeing some of this already, and the more quickly people come back to work, the less you can, or the more you can breathe easy, that housing market, at least in theory, should remain relatively stable because there's not a reason for people to leave because jobs are coming back. However, we need to think about how labor force shift is happening, because that has been certainly one piece of the data so far that's been a little tricky to see, that there's been an abrupt change negatively in the terms of the number of people that are in the labor force. But the speed at which the recession came on can explain some of that. But we also should be thinking that businesses, because they're concerned about bringing people back for myriad reasons, they might start looking at capital use, or let's say automation, in more complete ways and in industries you would never think that would automate as time moves on. Just a quick reminder of the US data. This is as of July. The new data will come out in about 10 days for August, but this is the last 3 recessions plus the new one. And you can see the evolution from 1990 on a monthly basis that's seasonally adjusted. Unemployment usually peaks after the recession is declared over, because we kind of move up in unemployment rate more slowly. This is somewhat of an anomalous recession because job markets have contracted much more quickly in this case than in past recessions. You can see that very sharp vertical climb on the far right-hand side, and in that shaded area, we've gone to the peak and now we're sliding down. The key is whether or not we have structural change in labor markets that we slide down, but we don't slide down back to what we can think of as quote unquote normal. And of course, that leads to a larger philosophical question: is there such thing as normal anymore? And there is in spirit and core, but whether or not the core is only thing left normal, and then the other parts of our labor market are going to be sifting around trying to figure out what normal means, is an open question coming forward. In terms of the industries that were affected, I'm going to walk you through April to July. So these data are the monthly data for the US, looking back 1 year and saying, okay, versus what happened in 2019 for that month, what percentage of jobs have been lost in these sectors? So this is what it looked like in April, which was a big month. This is what it looked like in May. Some recovery across most of these industry sectors. You can see that across most, that orange column picked up from the blue, but some of them are still a little bit down. For example, accommodation or hotels on the far right-hand side saw it go down again. June was a true sort of recovery month in the sense that it feels like that May was, in a sense, the trough of the labor market in this first round, and July showed a little bit more, but not an amazing amount more. So one of the caveats about July and whether or not we're having continued recovery momentum is that we did see some rollbacks, especially in California. Now, GDP growth came out earlier in August in terms of the first estimate for the second quarter. And you can see on the far right-hand side, this is basically the same timeline as I showed you with the unemployment rate earlier. You can see that very deep negative cut on the far right-hand side. The last piece of data we have are 32.9%. One of the things about that, which is critical, is that there's two things to think about. One, the 32.9 is the annualized, in a sense, growth rate multiplied by 4. So it's what happened from last quarter and then multiplied by 4 is if that's kind of the 12-month run rate. Well, the key is that all these data have the same basic construction. So this is a seriously historic change in the second quarter, but we kind of knew that was coming. So the cool thing in one sense is that while this is an amazingly negative number and it's really bad, forecasters essentially picked that was going to be the number. So the next slide I'm going to show you is a forecast that is updated, where in May 2020, they forecasted the second quarter at 32.2% negative. So very close, which suggests that this next slide is going to be something to watch and think, wow, that's actually pretty close. Well, the Federal Reserve in Philadelphia does a survey every quarter of 40 forecasters, and I'm going to show you one panel of their median forecast data. So each 2 columns, real GDP in the first 2 columns of data, unemployment rate in the second 2 columns, and don't worry about payroll employment growth because that's all over the place in terms of potential volatility. The other 2 are a little bit more forecastable, if you use that word. But the key is this, is that if you look at the next few quarters, they're expecting a big bounce in quarter 3. And you're hearing this politically, that quarter 3 is going to be this amazing thing. And the Trump White House is getting these data and they're seeing that number and going, wow, this is what we've generated out from growth. Notice in the previous quarter, the forecast for the third quarter was only 10.6. So these forecasters are seeing much more growth momentum in the third quarter. And we needed the third quarter to really, in a sense, establish the recovery momentum. But then that growth slows down in the fourth quarter, even though it is historically robust. But notice that it's less than the recovery that was expected in the fourth quarter from the last quarter. Now, why is that true? Is because when you pick up the third quarter so much more, you got to expect the subsequent quarters to not be as robust because you've already picked up all that energy, if you will, or that economic recovery energy. And as we slip into 2021, things moderate a little bit. But as we'll see in a minute, the annual numbers are really the key. For unemployment rate, we're expecting the unemployment rate to continue to go down relatively slowly and get down to about 9% at the end of the year. And as I'll show you in a minute, the annualized unemployment rate, we don't see full recovery until after 2023. And that's one of the critical pieces of this forecast and a lot of the forecasts out there. There is no one out there yet forecasting that we're going to be back at early 2020 numbers by, let's say, mid 2022 or late 2021. Most forecasters are out there saying 2023 under the best scenario is probably what you should be betting on as far as getting back. And that depends on a lot of things. And I'll talk about those things as we get closer to the end today. This is the annual growth. You can see it's going to be at least forecasted to be negative for 2020 and then slip into a normal growth mode for the next few years where unemployment is slowly descending from its relative heights here in 2020. So these data are actually very good, even though they're historically relatively high. It suggests that after this year is over, we're going to slip back into a more normal recovery mode rather than the violent movements we've seen in 2020, but it's going to take a little while to dig ourselves completely out of the hole. So those forecasts are just a little bit off. As I said earlier, it's the path of unemployment is slightly more pessimistic than it was last time in the sense of that it's descending at a little slower pace, but it's because we're getting a little bit more action. And again, think 22, 23 before we really feel like the momentum is there, and after 2023 to get back to square. These data came out on Friday also. This is what unemployment looks like across the United States. California at 13.7, seasonally adjusted is 13.3. We're seeing the movement down getting a little bit more slow, but New York's at 15.9, so New York is staying relatively high. Massachusetts is the highest in the country right now, and Nevada's actually come down very sharply. So there is a real mixed bag, and why that's important is because historically, when you look at the data, if unemployment rates remain relatively high in certain parts of the country, then our national recovery tends to sputter. If you think about the period between 2009 and 2011, the coastal areas of the United States in the wake of the Great Recession recovered more slowly than the interior states of the United States. And then once that initial pop on growth, mainly around energy markets, slowed down and the coast started to feel more recovery momentum, then we saw that trade off. And it really took 4 or 5 years for the entire country to start growing again in synchronicity. And that's the key. If we have this sort of hopscotchy growth where the coastal areas where a lot of our GDP in the United States is generated don't recover more quickly, then while the middle of our country may recover, the overall growth is going to be relatively slow and steady rather than fast, in a sense, more of a modified V where that right-hand leg of the V is flatter than a true V where it's a quick down and a quick back up. So we're watching these data every month to really see if we're getting more in a sense, a connection between the state's recovery with respect to jobs. One of the pieces thinking about California, we're now going to transition to California data using the US in one specific way as that bridge, is in continued unemployment insurance claims. So as those continued, the idea here is that you have initial claims for unemployment insurance, people walking into EDD and asking for their unemployment insurance because they've lost their job. And then you have the total number of weeks being paid, or the total amount of, in a sense, money that's being paid out, with the idea that it, in a sense, is a proxy for the number of people that remain on unemployment. Well, this is the progression of the US since January 2020. And you can see we went up and peaked sometime in early May and have been slowly sliding down ever since. And there's this little wobble in mid-July. This is through just 2 weeks ago in August. And these data come out weekly. And you can see that little wobble in July, and then it's back down. So that's good. In other words, you need to expect it's not going to be a smooth movement down. And even though May to early July looked like that, we had that little wobble as social policy kind of thought about constricting more completely again, and then we've been continuing onward. Now, we need that momentum to continue, and this is what California looks like: more episodic, more violent in its movements, same kind of pop in July, driving a little bit of the US pop, and then, but in trend, flattening out and now maybe slowly starting to decrease. And the hope is, and this reason I'm showing you this, is that if you take this and you map it back onto those positive forecasts, one of the reasons why those forecasts are getting better is they're expecting these data to smoothly fade back towards zero. If they don't, and they flatline or they pick back up again, those forecasts are going to become less optimistic. For California, the data that were just published on Friday show these changes from July 2029. We got about 600,000 people that have left the labor force, about 3% from last year, 2.313 million as suggested right off the top, still out of work from last year, and 13.7 on a non-seasonally adjusted basis for California's unemployment rate. Now, if we look at the same data we looked at the US for the jobs that have been lost since last year for April, May, June, and July, this is the progression of those data. And you can see I've highlighted the July data to give you a perspective on where we went, where we've been. So for example, if we look at arts, entertainment, and recreation, which is basically the amalgam of our tourist areas, museums, Disneyland, Six Flags, etc., those were very low initially, and really the lowest change in the sense of the most abrupt negative change in terms of jobs from the previous year, but they've picked up. But notice it flattened out a little bit. So June was a nice pickup from May. July came back down a little bit. So we're watching that very closely because we had good tourism energy and sort of climbing back up in June. And then when there was some slow restrictions, that slowed down again, because generally speaking, that's an industry where people gather. But for accommodation and food service, the mix of restaurants, hotels, and bars, that's picked up, remained relatively smooth. Again, July was a little bit less of a change. August and September are going to dictate a lot of the pace of our state's economy looking at these data. So when you come to the next webinar that Chabin hosts and I'm talking, we'll have this for September or for August. And we're going to see whether or not we sort of grabbed August as a time to really get back and start keeping that momentum energy going. One place to look on the far right-hand side is government. We've now started to see government start to fade a little bit in terms of jobs, which initially there wasn't much change. This is a little tricky to see unless you have a really wide screen, but the PowerPoint will be available to you after. What I wanted to show you is looking at all the counties in California, sort of the counties that have relatively low unemployment rates versus the ones that have high unemployment rates. So for example, Los Angeles County is still relatively high. It's the second. Imperial County, which is a classic, unfortunately, high unemployment county, has a very high unemployment rate, very similar to the Great Recession. But as you slide down and you move to the right, a lot of the counties that have lower unemployment rates are places that have had sort of a mixed bag or relatively low rates of cases and relatively low restrictions in their county, with a couple of exceptions like Santa Clara County. But the more rural, or let's say the more light suburban your county, the more likely you're seeing better recovery energy in terms of jobs. The more urbanized areas are, again, somewhat of a mixed bag depending on the types of businesses that are there, but they're all sort of sliding down slowly from relative heights. But it does show you there's some dichotomous aspects between, let's say, specific counties that had more restrictions, more cases, and maybe more urbanized versus ones that are a little bit more light on those issues. One of the things that we're concerned about with unemployment rates remaining relatively high is what's going to happen in housing. And so what economists have started to do is we started to look at median listing price rather than median home price. I'm going to show you home price very quickly in a minute, but median listing price shows California's actually picked up. So these are from July 2016 to July 2020. And you can see that from March to July, there's been a pickup in California. This is Los Angeles County, which initially fell down a little bit at the beginning of coronavirus and then has picked up. And Orange County has been a little bit flat. So this kind of gives you a sense of the Southern California market. Now I'm going to show you sort of the Northern California market, typified, at least in this case, by Butte County, which picked up a little bit and flattened a little bit since June, and then Sacramento, which is sort of slow and steady. So the good thing about this, it suggests that there's not a quick downturn. Economists are very concerned that people were going to leave California or want to get out of their house and cash out. But with low vacancy rates in rental, it's hard for people that don't want to completely pick up their economic lives and leave the area to sell and then rent someplace, because renting someplace is not necessarily available yet. We're watching rental prices relatively closely to see if we see a quick dive down, which suggests more rental vacancy. And more rental vacancy might mean more quick movements in terms of people selling their homes and looking for some other place to live. The fires, unfortunately, are probably going to exacerbate some of that movement over the next couple of months. Quickly look at housing prices. These are in selected areas. This is a percentage change from the previous year and then 2 years ago. So this also helps suggest that we have not seen, at least in the beginning stages of COVID-19, any real effect on housing markets. Those blue columns are from 1 year ago, and those 1 year ago percentage changes are relatively robust in most places, except for places where maybe the 2 year ago, how much growth there was over the last 2 years was also relatively robust. Santa Clara County and Alameda are a little bit squishy in that, but there was such growth the last 4 or 5 years in those areas that it's not shocking there's been some slowdown there. But this all provides an idea that so far so good on housing. And Zillow is also forecasting that we're not going to have real big contractions in housing prices to July 2021. This is their latest forecast, came out last week. Again, this is showing the counties in California. You can see that it goes up for about 4.3% in Tulare, and in Santa Clara, they're expecting a little bit over 4% growth, where the median for California is at 3% growth for the next year, but no negative numbers. So again, that's good for California housing markets. And you may be asking, well, why is that true? The rationale there is that with low interest rates, low housing vacancy, and the hope that we are going to see economic recovery start to speed up after the beginning of 2021, it looks like people are basically staying put. So those that are listing their homes are listing it basically where we were last month. And there's not a lot of downward pressure yet in housing markets, because there's really either A, no place to go, or B, no place to migrate, where the job market or the COVID-19 situation is necessarily better than might be the future of California. Again, the fires that are now happening in California may have some shadow effect on housing markets. We will see. In each one of these webinars, I usually do something that's either workforce or economic development related. What I wanted to talk about, because schools are opening again, specifically colleges and our universities, is to talk about higher education in the future. So one of the things about higher education is that it runs in sort of a 3-year planning cycle. And when sports are canceled or where large revenue bundles are canceled, it can lead to long effects on the ability to do other programs. And so we're watching very closely to see how higher education ultimately reacts to sports, their sports changing, which can mean scholarship changes for some athletes, which can also mean some delay in them wanting to go to college until they know they can play, because they rely on playing to maintain not only their path potentially towards pro career, but also just to pay for it. And that ends up paying for a lot of other sports for other athletes and a lot of other scholarships. The other thing is the other issue is the use of space. So if you take those two as sort of revenue and expenses, the expenses continue at universities, albeit not necessarily for the facilities, but to keep the programs going, the core, the labor is still there for faculty and staff. So when we're watching this and watching what programs take place, there's going to be a lot of debate over what's the real budget shock at universities and what that means for programs, and ultimately what that means for the trained labor force in California and the United States. In towns in which there is a relatively large university presence, or in so-called college towns in California, construction efforts on universities generate a lot of multiplier effects and a lot of jobs and incomes. Well, if those get slowed down, that can have a reverberative effect on the local community, which is negative. So watch for that if you're in places like Chico or Davis, or even places like San Diego, where you have these efforts going on and can have some sort of hole in specific industries with respect to construction because they don't continue due to budgets. And then finally, folks, in terms of the future, we're watching very closely to see how many students choose not to start a collegiate path this year because of primarily online learning, or because they have economic shock in their household. What does that mean for our labor force going forward? And really, what does it mean for those students in terms of the delay in their lives? That's going to probably be the subject of thousands of papers in economics over the next few years. But in reality, if we already had a middle skills gap, or if we already were concerned about a shortage of bachelor's degree holding workers, a change like this can easily exacerbate those concerns. So thinking forward, we're all still watching jobs. So those continued UI claims are going to be a continued focus until we probably get to the end of the year and really see them fade in earnest. And then the big thing, folks, and this is critical, is the loss of business. What businesses will remain? That's key. Fall and winter, we got a lot of stuff going on. Presidential elections coming up. We now know the tickets. It'll be intriguing to hear what at the Republican convention we hear out of the Trump White House this week. But for right now, those forecasts that I showed you before are not expecting any major SIP case surges in the fall and winter to upset the economic momentum that's already starting. However, if we do have that, it's going to completely flip-flop some of these forecasts and probably push them 12 months forward in terms of the optimism that's currently there. Policies being debated, whether or not that means more jobs or more labor market choking off of growth, is all a big debate right now. Congress is very split about how much to give and how to give. We will see if that comes through, and whether or not it really helps, in a sense, accelerate jobs and economic recovery momentum going into next year. But watch for all that stuff as we start to creep toward the election and as Congress gets back to work here relatively soon, because those are going to be key things looking at labor markets and really in terms of economic and workforce development, where we're going to have the industry level movements that suggest that those are recovering and we need to move our assets towards those that are recovering less quickly. So folks, with that, I'm now going to go to the chat and see if there are any questions. And it looks like we do have a couple. I got a question from Christina Miller. She asked if the slides will be ready at the end, and the answer is yes. Chabin will have those available along with the video of this webinar. Richard asks, I've seen some articles recently about large exit of workforce leaving San Francisco Bay Area because they can still work remotely, broadband making this possible. Any data about that? We are seeing some data that rents are falling, which either means A, that there's been some threat that people are leaving, or B, that vacancy is there and they're trying to attract new people to move in. Commercial real estate is also seeing some of those movements in the San Francisco Bay Area, but the data are just slowly emerging. We're hearing that anecdotally, and logic and theory suggest that that should be happening. Whether or not it happens in such a way that there's a sea change in the way that the cities work, specifically the Bay Area, is still an open question. And if the San Francisco Bay Area remains a global hub for innovation and new business ideas, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see more business adjustment to the new normal. And people are going to stay in those areas as long as their lifestyle is not completely impeded. And I think that's the key right now, is that if you believe that you're not going to be able to take advantage of what the city offers for the next couple of years, why would you slug it out at relatively higher rents when you can now take advantage of relatively low interest rates and maybe more available housing markets and broadband, and take your portable job someplace else and change your lifestyle, perhaps in your mind, for the better. Next question comes from Todd, who asks, how can we better calculate or estimate the total loss of economic output in a county, specifically lost sales and revenue? That's an outstanding question. So I happen to be working with the County of Sonoma right now in California on exactly this question. And the way that most economists do it, and this is what I'm doing, is to take what you believe the projected job losses are over the next few years and against a benchmark. So I'm using the beginning of 2020 as that benchmark and saying, okay, at the end of 2020, how many jobs have you lost and in what industries? And based on the calculation of output per worker, which exists in a couple of different places, you can then map that onto the gross regional product, or the GDP analog for a county. And then that maps over to a certain amount of sales, or I'm sorry, state and local tax revenues lost. And so those two together come from the employment data. So that's basically how you do it in theory. And every county is a little bit different, but that's how I've been doing it. You take job losses, map it to how much you lose per worker in terms of the value added that you bring to your community in terms of income, and then that maps over to a certain amount of tax losses. Kathy asks, we have the jobs in all sectors. How to entice folks to come back into the workforce? And if not college right now, what about the trades? There's no doubt about the fact that the trades and manufacturing are very alluring industries to see not only good growth because they tend to have higher than average paying jobs, but enticing people to come back in the workforce is one of the big debate items about how to put forward any additional money or extension of money in unemployment insurance, with the idea that is there, in a sense, an incentive? Are there incentives not to go back to work even if jobs are available? So it's intriguing to try to think about that friction and whether or not there are certain industries, in the trades and construction and manufacturing are two specifically, that tend to pay a little bit higher wages, which means you might migrate from a retail job into construction or manufacturing and thus have the incentive, because the pay is higher than unemployment insurance, to go back. But it could be because you don't necessarily want to lock into a job and you're thinking about a complete shift some other place, that you may not take that job. And one of the things that we're thinking about, I work for a university otherwise, and one of the things we're concerned about is there's going to be the snapback effect in spring, where the fall might be down, but then when people figure out that they need to get back to school because things are sort of slowly getting back to normal-ish, there's going to be this big surge of people coming towards campuses. We will see, but it might be all the way to fall 2021 at this stage. There's no doubt that there's some in the trades in terms of momentum if you're not going to college, but we need to watch for how much of that's happening because we just don't know the level of construction demand for right now. Deborah asks, can you expound on what's happening in government with the numbers you presented? What's happening in government is almost every single county and city government, as well as the state of California, is planning for a big downturn in budget this year and probably the next year, meaning the 2020-2021 fiscal year and then 2021-22. And then if recovery momentum continues to look relatively positive toward June 2021, the 2022-23 budgets will probably pick back up. But state budgets tend to lag about 9 months in terms of recovery. So when the macroeconomy recovers, the budgets seemingly get back 9 to 12 months later. So that's right now the cycle they're in. If recovery is going to be more robust come 2022, then it's probably going to be 2023 before state and local budgets really feel the positive effects of that. The key, folks, is the following. Deborah, that's such a great question you're asking, because it's probably the question of the day for most municipalities, if not all of them, is the stability of housing markets. If we have a repeat of what happened in the Great Recession, that will easily exacerbate specifically city and county budgets with respect to how they utilize property taxes. The commercial real estate piece is another issue that we're watching to see whether or not we see some downturn in values there that then force some change, and whether or not Prop 15 passes is another piece of the puzzle. But housing markets are the critical factor right now, and if they stay stable, that's going to help, in a sense, put a nice foundation to those budgets going forward. Folks, that looks like that's all the time we have, and it's also all the chat questions we have. Oh, we got one more question. I'll try to burn through this really quickly. Can the 2008 recession and reduction in college degree programs be a guide, or do we have to, or do we have too many variables now that we have not seen before? The effect on trained workers and the availability of jobs is a huge concern across all counties. Absolutely. We don't really know yet what industries are going to emerge with new jobs, but we can sort of say that at least in healthcare, STEM jobs, and probably construction and manufacturing, those are going to be the big four, at least in the initial stages going forward. And we're already seeing recovery momentum in those right now. It's in the low end, let's say low wage services jobs that we're very concerned, because that might be a structural change there where we have fewer businesses and thus fewer opportunities for people to get back to work. So the 2008 recession can be somewhat of a guide, but the nature of how we got into that recession in terms of how flip-flopped real estate and construction markets, that was the big problem there. That's not happening right now. Folks, thank you so much for your time today. If you have a question, my email is there on the bottom left-hand corner. It's eyler@econforensics.com. Don't hesitate to email me. And on behalf of Chabin Concepts and Kaiser Marston Associates, thank you for coming today, and stay safe and have a great month. Take care.